I see a much bigger challenge for Oregon's offense compared to its defense against Illinois, and there's something I'd like the Ducks to be able to do.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I've got my 3 biggest keys to getting a comfortable win against Illinois. It's not guaranteed to be comfortable, but it certainly can be if Oregon does not 1, not 2, but 3 things. And a couple of questions that I think are fair and I wonder about with regards to Autzen Stadium. That's all coming up on today's show. But I think the offense faces a bigger test in this game than the defense. Illinois has been a winning football team this year. The talent composite rating would tell you they're overachieving. Now, not everybody cares for that particular metric, and Illinois could just be a good team. They've got some guys who can play on Sunday. They've got some guys who could start on, teams that are pushing for a Big Ten championship this year. They're technically one of those teams. I think Illinois fans have reasonable expectations that that's not something they're going to achieve, but they're having a really good season. They're already bowl eligible, ranked number 20th in the country. But Oregon's offense is going up against a defense that is allowing less than 20 points per game and about 145 yards per game on the ground. And that is the crux of the point I want to make to start today's show. I think Oregon's going to win the football game 38-10. I think Oregon's offense is going to have enough success one way or the other. But I think Oregon's defense regularly gets overlooked because Dillon Gabriel was a big name to hit the transfer portal in the offseason. So that's what a lot of people, I think, nationally kind of cling on to. Evan Stewart has really emerged. Tez Johnson is a big name. Rumors are out there. I haven't been able to confirm that Tez might be Bo's brother. I'm not sure. But I swear I'm going to look into that and get an answer for you all. But the thing I want to see from Oregon is in this game, can they hit 200 yards on the ground? Can they have a rushing attack that feels like at times for at least a drive or two, it carries the offense down the field? Dillon Gabriel's really good. We've seen that throughout the year. He's been exactly the guy I expect him to be. He is pushing for a career best in completion percentage. I thought he'd be over 70% coming into the season, and he is well on track to be in the 70s, which is a great place to be. I would like to see just a shred more balance from this Oregon offense. They've only been over 200 rushing yards twice this year. If I asked you to name those games off the top of your head, what do you think they are? I'll give you 5 seconds. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oregon State and Michigan State. And Michigan State, frankly, if Oregon had wanted to keep its foot on the gas pedal, might have been able to be a 300-yard rushing day because Jordan James was over 150 yards in the first half, and you had Twitter asking the question, hey, what's the most yards an Oregon running back's ever gone for? Kenyon Barner, 324 against USC. Rumors are that he is still running, which he very well could be. He's a pretty fast guy, and I assume he's still in pretty good shape. Anyway, I think that for this Oregon rushing attack, they have not been a draw on the Oregon offense. They also haven't been able to consistently carry it, and that puts a lot on Dillon Gabriel's shoulders. And you look at what Bo Nix did in the last couple of years in this offense, he was fantastic. Heisman finalist last year. If Oregon won the Pac-12 championship game, he likely wins the Heisman Trophy. I felt like those two teams, last year and 2022 as well, were able to more heavily rely on the run. And I think that can help Dillon Gabriel because a running game, as they say, is a quarterback's best friend. When you look at Oregon's chunk plays in the passing game this season, they have really stepped it up in the last couple of weeks. And Evan Stewart has been at the center of that. And that's something that Oregon's really needed because you lose Troy Franklin, you bring back everybody else in the receiving corps, and you think, okay, this should be mostly the same, but he's got to be that explosive play guy. Well, there were no explosive plays against Idaho. There were some against Boise State, but now it feels like it's not just something Oregon can do, it's something that Oregon wants to do. And they're seeking out those looks defensively where they can push the ball down the field. But has Oregon created a big play off of play action? A lot of that was just straight drop back passing against Ohio State. And hey, our guy's better than your guy. And that's great. I think Oregon can do that with just about any secondary they're going to face this year. Michigan will provide a really big challenge next week as well. But, as an offense, you got 3 ways to move football. You can run, you can throw, you can play action. And I don't think the play action's been a huge part of this Oregon offense so far, or as much as it can be. It's not that they haven't been calling the plays or had any success with them, but it feels like it's either a straight run or a straight pass. So I think that can unlock another dimension for this team offensively, and also just take the load off of Dillon Gabriel a little bit. Allow him a couple drives where he's only got to complete a couple of passes, because he's in the high 70s completion percentage right now. If he keeps at this pace, he'll push for the most efficient season in the history of college football, which Bo Nix, of course, set a season ago. I don't know that that's something you want to rely on or depend on if you're Oregon and offensive coordinator Will Stein. Like, hey, Dillon, we need you to complete 78 to 80% of your passes this year. Well, that's asking a lot, even for a guy who's as efficient and effective as Dillon Gabriel has been, and he's brought the explosive element like I mentioned. This offense has to be able to operate at the same level of effectiveness if Dillon Gabriel's only completing 70% of his passes. And, against Ohio State, I think he was 23 of 34 in that sort of range, and they ran the football well enough. But there were also some field position things, like the onside kick-ish, where Oregon stole a possession there where, they didn't have to go down the length of the field. And I think a lot of explosive plays for this Oregon offense have come in the passing game. And remember, until Michigan State, Oregon didn't have a run or didn't have a carry from a running back that was 20 yards or more. So if you can do that against this Illinois defense, which has been real solid this year, and I think that's kind of the identity of this Illinois team, you look at the numbers, and when you just watch Illinois, their offense does enough. They can move the ball. They've got a couple of receivers we talked about on yesterday's show, Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin. Luke Altmaier's playing really good football, 15 touchdowns to just 1 interception so far this year. That's all been good and fine. But Illinois on the season is running for 146 yards a game, and they only throw for 220. They're averaging 365 yards of offense per game. That's not a lot. That's not the way they have won football games. So that's why I say this is a bigger test for the offense, because you're going up against the stronger of the two sides of the ball for Illinois, that being their defense. And I'd like to see if the run game can just be a little bit better for 4 quarters, or at least until Oregon gets a big lead. If this were to look like the Michigan State game where Oregon runs wild in the first half, gets a big lead, and then they just kind of run out the clock a little bit in the second half because they can lean on that defense, I'm not going to come on my reaction show and say, well, Oregon only had 170 yards on the ground. Well, if 140 of them came in the first half and 30 in the second, that makes me feel a lot better about the running game. But that's what I want to see from Oregon, and that comes down to the offensive line. Jordan James, of course. Whoever the number 2 running back is, likely to be Noah Whittington. I wonder if Jay Harris or Jayden Lamar have earned more carries, but so far it's been mostly those 2 guys. But it's those guys, it's Will Stein, that have got to be able to put it together, because I think going forward, and this is nitpicking, by the way. Oregon's got first world football problems. Said that a lot in the offseason. We've said it a lot, though not always, but we've said it pretty often during the season. We know how this offensive line is in pass protection. They're really, really good, and they've given Gabriel the time to take those shots down the field. But I'd like to see if the running game can kind of find its footing again and have a day where they average 6 or 7 yards a carry like they did against Oregon State. I think it was 7.5. So that's what I'd like to see from Oregon offensively in this game. Do you think they can do it? I believe in those Ducks. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. Not 1, not 2, but 3 keys to getting a comfortable win. Oregon's got a lot of different ways that they can win, but how do they win big? How do they cover 21.5 points, according to our friends at FanDuel? That is coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol. The probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists who are really smart to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. As someone who has used this before, I'm not a frequent drinker, but every now and then I can go out, have some fun with friends, Took Z-Biotics beforehand, felt great during, felt great after, felt great the next day. 10 out of 10 across the board. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. You won't be unsatisfied. But no questions asked if so. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. Then once you do that, check out our friends over at Prize Picks, of course, because Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And like I said, you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. There are over 10 million users for a reason, because Prize Picks is, metaphorically speaking, the man. So download the app today. Use code LockedOnCollege. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On College. After downloading the app, get $50 instantly after you play your first lineup. Go check out Prize Picks today and run your game. 3 keys to a comfortable win. Now, Oregon's got to do a lot of things right, of course, but most important one, number 1, got to force turnovers here. And yeah, that goes along to say you got to win the turnover battle. But if Oregon turns over Illinois, you're going to put them in a spot that they haven't been in, particularly Luke Altmyer. So there once was a quarterback named Luke Altmyer at Illinois who, in a game against Penn State just one season ago, had 4 turnovers. That hasn't been this sort of guy. And the Illinois offense is much better because of it. But when I have talked about the game plan for Illinois going into this matchup, what I think it should be, what I think it will be for Brett Bielema and company, it's to be efficient. It is to use the clock. It is to keep Dylan Gabriel in the offense over on the sideline. If I'm Brett Bielema and I win the coin toss, I'm taking the football. And at the very least, I don't want Oregon to touch it until there's less than 10 minutes to go in the first quarter, ideally even less than that, even if it's just a field goal. If I'm the Illini, I want a 6, 7, 8-minute drive. You turn Illinois over in this football game, and that thin line starts to become pretty fragile, because playing that style, which can be done, and I think we saw Michigan do it a lot last year, I think we've seen great Stanford teams of the past employ the strategy really effectively. If you can run a game that efficiently and don't turn the football over, take advantage of your possessions, and even when you punt or settle for a field goal, you're able to use a lot of clock, you can just keep the game tight. Think first half Oregon State from earlier this year. They ran the football. They threw it a little. They were really good on 3rd down. They converted a couple of 4th downs as well. They scored 2 touchdowns, and they went into the half, and they were only down by 8 points. And they weren't able to replicate that in the second half. And what happened? Oregon was able to get off the field. So, yeah, 3rd, 4th down important, but Illinois has done such a good job keeping Luke Altmyer comfortable enough, getting the ball out of his hands, and not turning the football over. I think if you create turnovers in this game and get more quicker possessions, or get the ball quicker back to your offense, I think that plays right into Oregon's hands. So that is key number 1. Key number 2, start fast. Illinois does not want to get into a track meet here. Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, those are capable guys. They're going to be a serious test for this Oregon secondary, not Ohio State level, and I thought they held themselves up pretty well in that football game. But certainly Ohio State got plenty of yards. Illinois should not sniff 30 points in this game. They shouldn't get over 20. Illinois went to Penn State earlier this year, only put up 7. I think Oregon is a better team and a better defense than Penn State. Penn State was at home. Oregon's here at home. I haven't given up 10 points because Luke Altmyer is capable, and if Oregon gets a big lead, they can take their foot off the gas, put some second unit guys in there at the end, and maybe give up a field goal or a touchdown like they did against Michigan State. But when those starters are on the field, Illinois should have a tough time moving the football. And I think if Oregon gets off to a strong start, you put the pressure on Illinois to deviate from what I think their game plan is going to be. Because if you want to control the clock, what's the first thing you're going to do? Well, you're going to run the football. It is hard for any offensive coordinator, I don't care what team you're playing for. I don't care what level you are playing at. I have seen great rushing attacks at the FCS ranks, at the FBS ranks, Power 4, G5, all over the place, get away from it when they start trailing. If Oregon comes out and scores the first 10 points of this game, I expect Illinois, or I suspect Illinois won't have as much of a desire to go to the run, and they might say, you know what, we just need Luke Altmaier to start making some plays. And I trust this Oregon defense to defend the pass in particular. And last week against Purdue, they weren't great against the run. Gave up over 200 yards on the ground, and then they stiffened once the Boilermakers got into the scoring area or anywhere close to it. That's not a great formula to repeat here against Illinois, because I think Illinois is a better team than Purdue and has a greater ability to capitalize on those drives that have gone down the field and actually put some points on the board, whether that's making a field goal or going down and punching the ball into the end zone. I think for this Illinois team, they want to have some semblance of balance. Even though they haven't been the most productive offense this year, I think they're going to want to come out and at least be balanced. And if you push them to a 60-40, we have to pass because Oregon's up 14-3 or 10-0 or whatever it is early in this football game, I think you can get them out of that mindset of, hey, we want to run the ball. Hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z to kill the clock, reduce the number of possessions, because then they might run out of time. So I think those two things are really, really important. I know I talked about running the football earlier, but I'll get to my third key in just a sec. And not that I don't think it matters, but I think those are the top two keys. If you turn over Illinois and get extra possessions for your offense with maybe some really good field position, and if you start fast, Illinois is going to struggle to keep up. They are not built. It's not the identity of this Illinois team to compete in a track meet. It's just not. They want to slow it down a little bit. They want to play a little bit more of a balanced, grind it out sort of game. So I think if you do those things, you'll be just fine. Key number 3, though, for Oregon is one that I've had in their keys to the game before. I'm pretty sure I had it going into Purdue last week, but create explosives, because it feeds off of the second key I've got here, which is starting strong. And Oregon against Purdue, I was always confident Oregon was going to win the football game. But on the road, Oregon was able to take the crowd out of it pretty quickly. How? Chunk play to Evan Stewart. Takes the wind out of their sails a little bit. Now, Oregon's, of course, at home in this game, and I'm going to talk about the crowd a little bit more in the third segment too. But I think for Oregon, if you create those explosive plays and get the crowd into it at another level, pretty tough place to play. I have seen some, shall we say, misguided efforts on Twitter by Illinois accounts, fans, whoever. It's not a big stadium. It's not. Ohio State said the same thing. It's only 54, 60,000. I don't know how many people exactly are going to be there. Here's what I do know. It's going to be exceptionally loud. It's going to be hard to play. And you get the crowd into it if you create those explosives early. And one thing that I've talked about on the show this week, and I've heard a lot of other people discuss leading up to this game, is the team speed for Illinois is just not there. So if Oregon is able to avoid shooting themselves in the foot, with penalties or turnovers or sloppy play or anything like that, the explosive plays are going to be there. And once you do that, you can get the ball rolling. You can get the ball rolling, maybe make Luke Altmaier take a chance that he doesn't want to. And remember, this Oregon secondary and defensive line, and the linebackers are part of it too, but Oregon secondary has been really good. Defensive line has been great. I don't know. I know people are going to ask. I don't know if Jordan Burch is going to play. He's week to week. I expect to see him at some point this season. I feel confident saying that, but I don't know when exactly he's going to play. But the way that guys on the defensive line have stepped up in the last couple of weeks in his absence has been awesome to see. Tatum Tuiyoti's been active, but it's been the Derek Harmon, Mateo Uyunglele show. Those guys look like NFL players, and Mateo's just a true sophomore. Harmon's a junior, and at this rate, we're losing Harmon after the season, which stinks. But, I mean, are you going to be able to blame the guy? Because he is ridiculously disruptive. Pro Football Focus loves him, and Oregon fans should love him too. So I think if Oregon creates those explosive plays, gets the crowd into it, you're looking at a defense that's playing behind a hyped-up crowd who's rooting for the number one team in the country for the first time in 12 years. Who cares? We all probably care a little bit. Dan Lanning doesn't. He shouldn't. Love the answer. Love the answer. My guy Jared Mack taking a little bit of a stray, but it's a great response, and I think is a testament to the mindset that he's instilling in that locker room and why they can play to a standard rather than to the level of their opponent each week, and why I think Oregon wins this game 38-10. But this defense is yet to allow a 200-yard passer who doesn't play for Ohio State, that has one of the 3 to 5 best receiving cores in all of college football, and a veteran-capable quarterback in Will Howard. And Luke Altmaier is capable, and Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin are solid. They're not those guys. So I think that if Oregon does those 3 things, they will be just fine. And even if they don't do those 3 things, they can still be fine. It just might be more uncomfortable than Oregon fans would like. But those keys to the game. You force turnovers, you start strong, you create explosives, Oregon's going to win big. You hit 2 of those keys, particularly the first 2, this game could be over by halftime. You go 0 for 3 on those keys, you let Illinois get a couple of long scoring drives, and the offense maybe doesn't execute, goes 3 and out. Hey, Illinois can hang around in this football game. Make no mistake about it. I like the Ducks 38-10. A question that's been raised about Autzen Stadium. I'm not usually a fan of doing that. I think that's a fair question to ask, and we're going to address that coming up next. After I tell you this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So Oregon's favored by 21.5. Do you feel confident Oregon's covering that number? FanDuel.com. Are you trying to hedge your happiness with, if they keep it close, at least I'm getting some out of it? Well, Illinois plus 21.5, also available at FanDuel.com. Do you not know what to do? Do you just want to feel something? Put down a little cheddar on the Oregon money line because you feel confident they'll win no matter what? By all means, you can do that. Where? At America's #1 sportsbook. It's FanDuel.com. All right, mailbag time to wrap up today's show. YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or at Locked On Ducks. If you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, go become a Locked On Ducks insider. Link in the description below. Then it's just $5 a month after a 14-day free trial. Zachy B sends in this question. Hey again, Spencer, longtime listener, watcher, Locked On Ducks, third-time caller. Well, I appreciate you, man. I have 2 questions for you if you feel so obliged to answer. Indeed, I do. We know the Autzen crowd was fired up for Ohio State. The crowd there is always fantastic, but do you think we see any drop-off of energy with Illinois coming in? Living in Illinois myself, look at this. Oregon fans are everywhere. National brand, baby. Living in Illinois myself, I know not to sleep on the Illini, too. You mentioned that you loved cooking on Tuesday's show. Being the only Ducks fan out here surrounded by Illini country, what should I cook for the viewing party I'm having? Thanks and go Ducks. I will definitely answer that second question. I love that second question. As for the first question, I think it is a completely fair one to ask because Ohio State was a bigger opponent, a huge game, college game day in the house. So those students in particular, but a bunch of other fans had been thinking about that game and getting the juices flowing for it since 6 a.m. or even earlier. Some people were there the night before to camp out for college game day. Not doing that for Illinois this week. You got the number 20 team in the country. Good opponent. Absolutely quality opponent. If Oregon goes and wins this game, you're not going to hear me saying, Illinois is stuck. No, Illinois has been playing winning football. Last time I checked, that's the objective of the game. If Oregon wins big, and they think they will, I'll be impressed. I was impressed with Purdue last week because, hey, first shutout in 12 years and no emotional letdown spot, which a lot of people had pegged, fairly so. And I think it is fair to wonder if the crowd will have that same sort of juice, which is why key number 3, if you're listening to and remember the show from earlier today here on Locked On Ducks, was get the explosive plays because you get the crowd into it. You fire them up. This is a day game. This is Illinois, not Ohio State. No college game day. And I fully expect Autzen to be a rowdy environment. Ohio State was described by many in attendance as the loudest stadium they'd ever been to. So those going to the game on Saturday afternoon at Autzen, I challenge you. I absolutely challenge you. Create another social media thread of Illini fans plugging their ears like the Buckeye fans did. Or find me a screenshot or a picture of a text message of someone saying loudest stadium I've ever been to. Because when you have a day game and you don't have Ohio State and you don't have College game day, yeah, it might be a step down. But guess what? Autzen stepping down from a 12 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10, still going to cause some procedural issues for the Illini. I think the juice can come from Oregon getting off to a strong start, but also Oregon's the number one team in all the land. You don't want to show any cracks. You don't want to have a letdown here at home. I think the fans will bring it. I don't know if they can get to that Ohio State level because that was the most attended game in the history of Autzen Stadium, I'm pretty sure. And boy, it was probably the biggest game in the history of Autzen Stadium. This one's not. Still matters a great deal. And Oregon can win the national championship, so that should provide plenty of juice. But to anyone who thinks, oh man, people are just trying to hate on Autzen. No, I think it's a fair question to ask. I always have high expectations for Autzen Stadium and the environment that'll be provided. I'll set the over-under at 3.5 pre-snap penalties for Illinois in this game. You tell me if you think Autzen goes over-under. They go over that number, cooking. But if it's only one, hey, maybe Illinois is just that good. They got a pretty good head coach. As for your second question, what do you make? I'm a big fan of homemade guac. Huge. I'm a big, I could eat chips and guac for an hour and call that a meal. That is one of my biggest weaknesses. I'm actually trying to buy fewer chips in my own house. I can't stop eating chips. But if you make good, fresh, well-seasoned homemade guac, no tomatoes. Bobby Flay and now myself are staunchly against putting tomatoes in guac. It dilutes the avocado, which is the star of the dish. So make sure you leave the tomatoes out, but get everything else that you want in there. As much jalapeno as you want, salt, lime juice, onion, all that pizzazz, garlic and whatnot. Gotta have the guac in there. Finger food, great option. Great option. No one wants to have to use silverware. Just napkins and plates. So I'm a big fan of whatever your favorite slider is. Maybe you want to braise some pulled pork. Maybe you want to go burger sliders, King's Hawaiian buns, top notch for whatever kind of slider you want. That can work with burgers. That can work with pulled pork. That can work with brisket. That can work with chicken if you wanted to go that route, buffalo chicken slider. A lot of different options there. But my favorite sort of game day food, anything you can grab, you gotta have chips and dip. And also, go find yourself some fresh fruit. Doesn't require anything from you other than going out and getting it. But sliders, chips, and quality dip. As for dessert option, look, a lot of different ways you can go. Brownies are a crowd pleaser. There aren't that many people in the world that won't eat a brownie. So I'm getting hungry already, and I already ate earlier. I had Panda and Panda Rocks. But yeah, I'll stop talking food now because this could become a food podcast really quickly. But those would be my two recommendations. Whatever slider you want on King's Hawaiian, chips and fresh guac. Make sure you get good chips that will not break in the guacamole as well. Got to think about those sorts of things. Jeremiah asks if this team would beat 2014 Oregon. Whew. You know I'm a big Dylan Gabriel fan. I'm not taking him over Marcus Mariota. So quarterback advantage there. Running backs, Tyner and Freeman probably over James and Whittington. Wide receiver, big edge to this team. Offensive line, probably slight edge 14. Slight. Defensive line, this unit's deeper. They had Defoe and Eric Armstead. Dude, I don't even know. I tried to think about this question before I came on to record to try and answer it. That would be a wildly competitive football game. I think you've got better linebackers on this Oregon team. That Oregon team had some dogs in the secondary. If I remember correctly, both Troy Hill and Terrence Mitchell were there. Guys had NFL careers. I'm going to pull that up real quick because that's so close. I could really make that argument either way. Guys who played defensively for Oregon, looks like they didn't track tackles, back then, which is bizarre, but that's tough. That's tough. Aiden Schneider was the kicker. I would love to have Aiden Schneider right now. Incredibly reliable. I think it's a toss-up, man. I really do. I really think there are aspects. I think I like this defense more. I'd lean towards that rushing attack, but this passing attack. So, yes, they could beat him. They could beat him. I got to stop talking myself into a circle. I might be thinking about this all night. Let me know. Let me know. I'm genuinely curious what you all think. 2014 Oregon or this year's Oregon? And I love this year's Oregon. The 2014 roster was sick. The 2014 roster was really, really good. But it's a fair question. Might need more information. I saw that team for 15 games. I've only seen 7 from this one. So that's my official answer is I don't know yet. But I'll let you know by the end of the year. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.